Okay, so let us continue where we left off this morning. So we have been looking at verse number 9 of the Mahamangala Sutta, which is, as we have seen, asceticism and the spiritual life, insight into the Four Noble Truths and the seeing for oneself of nirvana. So we're going to look at a couple of more suttas which deal with the idea of kind of austerity from the Buddhist point of view. There isn't that much there, about austerity and asceticism, because it's not an important part of the Dhamma. It's just that there's a bit of nuance regarding it, which I mentioned in the previous sutta. There's another way of looking at this as well, and this is found now. We are in the numerical discourses, the chapter of 8, the Attaka Vagga, Sutta number 11, and this is at Viranja. So the Buddha was staying at this place, and he meets a Brahmin, and this Brahmin is like abusing the Buddha in various ways, and kind of calling him names, basically. And one of the ways he does that is he says, "A good Gautama is austere," and austere is tapassi, and tapassi is like a self-tormentor or mortifier. And the Buddha replies, he says the following, "There is a way you could rightly say that I'm austere, for I say that bad, unwholesome qualities, misconduct by body, speech and mind, are to be disciplined." The disciplined here is and austere is basically the same word in Pali. It's just that it's hard to render it in that way in English. It's basically the same word. One who has abandoned them, cut them off at the root, made them like a palm stump, eradicated them, and made them incapable of reappearing in the future. Such a one I call austere. Now I have abandoned the bad, unwholesome qualities that are to be disciplined. I've cut them off at the root, made them like a palm stump, eradicated them, and made them incapable of reappearing in the future. But that's not what you had in mind, or what you were talking about. So there's a kind of austerity. The austerity is not a physical one. It's not a self-tormenting of the body, which is so common around the spiritual and religious world, but it's more like a disciplining of the mind. But even the word discipline is kind of used here in a very special sense, because the Dhamma is not so much about discipline as about using wisdom on the path, using wisdom to guide the mind in the right way. Very often we talk about the idea of self-discipline, but self-discipline really, to work, to be powerful, has to be guided by wisdom. Wisdom is much more powerful than self-discipline. We know how human will is very weak very often, and how we fail at so many things. But if you have wisdom, then the will kind of falls into line with that wisdom, and then the self-discipline happens naturally as a consequence. So this is the kind of austerity that the Buddha has in mind, or the kind of asceticism that he has in mind. And so it's quite different from how we normally think about this. Anyway, let's go on to the next sutta. And the next sutta is from the connected discourses of the Buddha. This is the 42nd chapter. This is the Gamani Samyutta. Gamani is like headmen. These are the kind of people who were in charge of villages and that sort of thing. And this is the Buddha in conversation with a variety of headmen. And the first headman here is called Rasya. And this is what happens. This is Rasya speaking to the Buddha. And he says the following: "Sir, I have heard this. The ascetic Gautama criticizes all forms of mortification. He categorically condemns and denounces those fervent mortifiers who live rough." We saw this already before, the idea of a fervent mortifier who live rough. "Do those who say this repeat what the Buddha has said, and not misrepresent him with an untruth? Is their explanation in line with the Dhamma, with the teaching? Or are they legitimate grounds for rebuttal and criticism?" And the Buddha replies, "Chief, those who say this do not repeat what I have said. They misrepresent me with what is false, hollow, and untrue." So then comes a whole long section of 10 kinds of pleasure seekers, 7 pleasure seekers and 3 mortifiers. And then the Buddha looks at them and whether they are to be criticized or whether they are to be praised for that pleasure seeking and that mortification. So we know that already, that in the Dhamma, seeking pleasure is not necessarily wrong. It depends on where you seek pleasure. If you seek pleasure in meditation, then it's usually a good thing. It leads to awakening. We've seen this already. And we have seen that even mortifying can be, in certain circumstances, can be correct. So let's see what the Buddha has to say here about these things. I've taken out 2 of these 10 just to contrast the pleasure seeker with the mortifier. So the Buddha says, now consider the pleasure seeker who seeks wealth using legitimate, non-coercive means, and who makes themselves happy and pleased, and shares it and makes merit. And they enjoy that wealth untied, uninfatuated, unattached, seeing the drawbacks and understanding the escape. So he's here talking about a particular kind of pleasure seeker, and the way in which they seek that pleasure and how they use it afterwards. That's kind of the point here. So then the Buddha says, this pleasure seeker may be praised on 4 grounds. What are the 4 grounds for praise? They seek the wealth using legitimate, non-coercive means. This is the first ground. So that's good. You earn your living in the right way, not by kind of nefarious and dodgy ways, but in a good way. And you don't coerce anyone, you don't kind of force anyone or whatever. And that's good. They make themselves happy and pleased. This is the second ground for praise. This is what we saw before. This is this Buddhist idea. If you make yourself happy and pleased in Buddhism, it's a ground for praise. It is not, Buddhism is not the kind of a teaching of denial. It's not a teacher of, of some sort of, it's not a puritanical religion at all. Enjoying oneself is good. Why? Because that's what we want to. It comes natural. We want to find enjoyment. What matters is how we find that enjoyment. That's kind of the critical thing here. But here, even just enjoying ordinary wealth, sensual wealth, we're talking here about ordinary wealth, even that is considered good if you use it in the right way here. They share it and make merit. This is the third ground for praise. You are generous and kind and you make merit. You ensure that this is going to bring happiness for the long run. This is the third ground. And then the fourth ground is that you enjoy that wealth untied, uninfatuated, unattached, seeing the drawbacks and understanding the escape. This is the fourth ground for praise. This pleasure seeker may be praised on these 4 grounds. And there is no criticism of this pleasure seeker. It doesn't say that seeking pleasure even here we're talking about the ordinary material pleasure. Even that is not actually criticized in any particular way. And the reason is because this last sentence, you enjoy it untied, uninfatuated, unattached, seeing the drawbacks, understanding the escape. That is the critical sentence. And so probably what we are seeing here is we're seeing someone who is an Aryan and still enjoying sensual pleasures, like a stream enter a sotapanna or something like that. That's probably what we're talking about here. Because they are the ones who understand the escape. What is the escape? Well, the escape is primarily the deep stages of samadhi. You escape from sensual pleasures. You're no longer tied to them at that point. And of course, one of those very kind of remarkable things that I kind of like to point out is this sutta in the Anguttara Nikaya, where it says that if you attain deep samadhi, you actually enjoy the sensual pleasures more. This is the kind of the really weird thing. It's kind of hard to get your head around. If you are just attached to ordinary sensual pleasures without having deep samadhi, because of all that craving, because of all the attachment, you're not really able to enjoy it properly. Your mind is always somewhere else, always moving on to the next enjoyment, never really being properly in the present. But if you enjoy sensual pleasures without the craving, actually it is much more enjoyable. And it says in that sutta that you get ordinary food, bad clothes, all kind of dodgy stuff, but it's better for you. Yeah, you enjoy it more. It's like the king's fine meal with all the black rice grains removed. That was the height of luxury at that time. The black rice grains were removed. That was kind of very positive. These days, they probably have machines that do that. You don't see many black grains in the rice these days. Probably machines do that. But in those days, it had to be hand-picked out. Yeah, it was a real luxury to have rice without black grains. And so even the simple food seems like the kind of best sort of food available. And that's kind of one of the paradoxes of, if you really want to enjoy sensuality, get into jhanas first. So it's interesting, isn't it? Otherwise, you're just messing around. It's not really working for you. So, of course, that idea of enjoying sensuality is going to stop you from getting into jhana in the first place. So don't think like that, but you kind of get the idea here. It's kind of fascinating. So that is how you understand the escape. And the escape also has to do with the noble path, because that's kind of the ultimate escape from everything, is the fact that you are an Aryan. That's kind of the final escape. So that's the pleasure seeking. It's kind of surprising the degree to which the Buddha praises this pleasure seeker. Now we come to the mortifier, the ascetic, the person who is like into self-torment. So in this case, the third kind of self-tormentor may be criticized on one ground and praised on two. What is the one ground for criticism? They mortify and torment themselves. This is the one ground for criticism. We don't like pain. We shouldn't indulge in pain. We shouldn't make that something important. There is enough pain in life already. Don't have to seek out any more pain. There's already enough. You sit in meditation, you can't really avoid a little bit of pain. That's just par for the course. And you don't need to add to that. So that is a ground for criticism. What are the two grounds for praise? They achieve a skillful quality. This is a ground for praise. In other words, they are growing in good qualities. Despite that torment, they're growing in good qualities. And here the good qualities, is further qualified. They realize a superhuman quality, a distinction in knowledge and vision worthy of the noble ones. This is the second ground. This is the second ground for praise. Okay. So the one is you achieve a skillful quality, and the second one specifies what kind of skillful quality. A very high skillful quality, the Aryan stages or the jhanas. The superhuman qualities, the uttarimanusa dhamma, are the four jhanas and the four stages of awakening here. Knowledge and vision worthy of the noble ones is the same thing. It's also the four jhanas and the four stages of awakening here. They always go together. The four jhanas and the four stages of awakening is like one group of qualities that you achieve, and they're all considered in this very high way, lifted up on the pedestal, if you like. Superhuman qualities, the qualities that go beyond uttarimanusa dhamma, qualities that goes beyond the human realm or goes beyond humanity. Ordinary humanity doesn't experience these kind of qualities. And then you have the knowledge and vision worthy of the noble ones. A distinction in knowledge and vision worthy of the noble ones. It's a beautiful phrase. Allang arya nanadassana visesa is the Pali word. Allang arya nanadassana visesa, a distinction in knowledge and vision worthy of noble ones. One of the very interesting things about that is that we talk about jhanas and we talk about insight as if these are two separate things. But these knowledge and vision, this distinction in knowledge and vision worthy of the noble ones is again the four jhanas and the four stages of awakening. The four jhanas are knowledge and vision. They are insights. They are not separate from that. After you come out of these states, you will have a different understanding of reality. Suddenly you will see the world in a new way, because that is part of what happens when you enter a deep state of samadhi. So very often this distinction that we made between samatha and vipassana, samadhi and insight, is kind of artificial. All of these things blend together. They are kind of one thing, really, and they always come together. So in this way, the fervent mortifier may be criticized on one ground and praised on two. Yes, it's kind of strange. The mortifier is criticized more almost than the pleasure seeker, even though the pleasure seeker is seeking pleasure in not the ideal kind of way. And this says something, I think, about the Buddhist path, about what this path really aims at. It aims at overcoming suffering. And all the way along the path, you minimize the suffering and you maximize the spiritual kind of happiness. All right. Let us go to the next sutta. The next sutta is just a little one to show you the idea of the of brahmacharya, the spiritual life, and what that means in the sutta specifically. And I did say it means specifically the idea of celibacy and the idea of avoiding sexuality. So here we have from the numerical discourses, the sixth is the Chakkanipata, number 44. And this is a lady called Migasala, and she goes to the Venerable Ananda, I think, and have a connection with Venerable Ananda. And then the Buddha, later on, Venerable Ananda goes to Buddha to clarify the question that she asked. And so she says the following: my father Purana was chaste, set apart, avoiding the common act of sex. When he passed away, the Buddha declared that since he was a once returner, he was reborn in the host of joyful gods, Tusita Devas, the joyful gods. I think that's what is meant here. But my uncle Isiddhata was not chaste. He lived content with his wife. When he passed away, the Buddha declared that since he was also a once returner, he was reborn in the host of joyful gods. How on earth are we supposed to understand the teaching taught by the Buddha when the chaste and the unchaste are reborn in exactly the same place in the next life? Yeah, so that's kind of interesting. So what does that mean? Isn't being chaste or not practicing sexuality is part of the path? Yeah, so we should expect to be kind of be better kamma if you abstain from these things, and you should be reborn in a higher place as a consequence of that. So what is going on here? And the Buddha replies, he says, if Isiddhata had achieved Purana's level of ethical conduct, which is sila, Purana could not have even known Isiddhata's destination. And if Purana had achieved Isiddhata's level of wisdom, Isiddhata could not have even known Purana's destination. So both individuals were lacking in one respect. So basically what he's saying here is that one was wiser and the other one had better ethical conduct. So if they had the same wisdom, then indeed the one who was chaste, the one who was abstaining from sexuality, would have been reborn in a higher location. But because they weren't equal in other faculties, that is why they were still reborn in the same place. And so this shows you that in Buddhism, abstaining from sexuality is good kamma. It's a part of sila. Even though it is not considered evil, sexuality is nothing fundamental. It's not kind of deeply bad or terrible, anything like that. If you do practice it, you are still doing something positive that leads you onwards on the path in a positive way, and it allows you to access meditation or all these things easier, as we have seen before. So that's a very short little sutta on the idea of the brahmacharya and what it means and how it fits with the rest of the suttas. So now we come to the Four Noble Truths. And so this is, obviously here we're coming to the very core of what the Dhamma is about. And we're talking about insight into the Four Noble Truths. What exactly does that mean? And I want to discuss that a little bit. This is obviously a very large topic, and we can really only scratch the surface of this topic. As you will know, the Four Noble Truths are like the overarching teaching in the suttas. All suttas fall into within the idea of the Four Noble Truths. This is what the Buddha says in the Mahahatipadopama Sutta, the longest sutta on the elephant's footprint. He specifically says that in that sutta. So for that reason, everything we have seen so far really also somehow fits within these Four Noble Truths. But they are very interesting. I think of all the teachings in the suttas, the way they are set out in the standard way is itself very interesting and worthy of contemplation, because really, by understanding them properly, you are understanding the entirety of the Dhamma right there. So we're going to focus on the sutta called, which I mentioned before, the setting in motion of the wheel of the Dhamma, Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. And this sutta is found in two places in the suttas. One place is in the Connected Discourses, 56, the Satcha Sangyutta, the Connected Discourses on the Truths, and it's also found in the Vinaya Pitaka, in the kind of biography of the Buddha, when he sets out and he starts teaching, because this is obviously generally known as the first teaching of the Buddha, although, as I mentioned before, it's probably not quite as simple as that, and that teaching probably was taught over a period of time, and then it was kind of contracted later on. I think, anyway, don't need to spend too much time on that now. So these are the Four Noble Truths. Here they have been extracted from the discourse, which itself is quite a bit longer than this. So let's have a look at these Four Noble Truths. So the first one. Now this is the noble truth of suffering. Rebirth is suffering, old age is suffering, illness is suffering, death is suffering, being coupled with the disliked is suffering, separation from the liked is suffering, not getting what you want is suffering. In brief, the five aggregates, the five grasping aggregates are suffering. That is the first noble truth. And you will have heard this many, many times before in Pali, in English, in I don't know what languages, how many languages we have represented here, but lots of different languages. But what exactly does it mean? And it is actually a very profound kind of teaching. And so I want to bring out some of the ideas here. On the one hand, it is quite straightforward. Many of these things are kind of obvious. Old age is suffering, illness is suffering, death is suffering. Okay, we can all agree with that. Being united with what you don't like is suffering. Sure. Separation from what you like is suffering. Absolutely. Not getting what you wish for is suffering. Indeed, that's absolutely true. Not getting what you wish for, that's terrible. And happens all the time. That's the problem, right? And so, on the one hand, it's quite straightforward. It's not really hard to understand what is going on here. But on the other hand, it is also surprisingly profound. And this last part here, the five grasping aggregates of suffering, are really profound. But the first part here is also much more profound than you might think. And so we want to look at this in a bit more detail. It seems kind of straightforward, but it actually is profound. And this is so much of the truth of the Dhamma. You don't need to contemplate dependent origination or whatever to understand, to see that there's something profound going on. All you need to do is contemplate some of the simple realities, and that's often enough. So let's have a look at this. So the first, it begins here with this is the noble truth of suffering. Noble truth of suffering. That's already kind of slightly weird. Noble truth of, I can sort of understand the noble truth of happiness. What do you mean noble truth of suffering? How can that be noble? We want to be happy. We want to avoid dukkha. In what sense is this possible? And of course the reason is, one of the main reasons is because this is something that you uncover by insight. This is such an important point. And this is one of the reasons why, as Buddhists, we often go wrong when we talk about suffering too much, because the majority of people in the world are not really capable of understanding what we say. If you start to talk about the noble truth of suffering, they think you are one of those pessimistic Buddhists. But actually, we're not pessimistic Buddhists at all. If anything, we are just realistic, and then we show you how to achieve happiness. How can that be pessimism? It's just, the point here is that this is profound. This is something you understand through insight. By becoming a stream mentor, only a stream mentor fully understands the idea of suffering. And the way to actually understand it is happiness. And so first of all, you have to develop very profound happiness, deeper happiness than the vast majority of people have ever experienced in their life, and based on that only can you understand what suffering is. So happiness, understanding happiness, leads to understanding suffering. And so this is a very different from what people think it is. Then it is the idea of truth, right? So the point of Buddhism is not to set forth some kind of doctrine, something to believe in. The point of Buddhism is to teach you what life actually is about. The idea is to achieve truth. And in this sense, there is some affinity with scientific truths. Why do we do science in the world? Well, because we want to understand how the world works, and when we understand how the world works, then we can act in accordance with that understanding, and we can create technology, and we can understand the expansion of the universe or whatever, and we can harness atomic energy and what have you. But the point is that we want the truth. The truth is very important, because if you haven't got the truth, it means you are blind. It means you don't know what you're doing. If you haven't got the truth, you can't make good choices. You need to know how things work to be able to make good choices. And so truth is incredibly important in Buddhism. In Buddhism, it is not faith that is the most important thing. In Buddhism, it is the truth that is the most important thing. That is what matters. And that truth, for it to really be true, has to be understood directly by yourself. It is not something that is just handed to you on a plate. It is something that you have to experience and understand for yourself. And this is what the Dhamma really is about. This is why it is non-delusion. It is moving away from misunderstandings, seeing nature, seeing the mind and body, seeing the human predicament for what it actually is. That is the truth. And that truth is a noble truth. It is not just any old truth, right? It is not just the truth about galaxies and solar systems or whatever. It's a truth that is profound in a certain sense. That is why it is noble. It is noble because it gives you the highest thing that anyone could ever give you, achieving meaning and purpose and all of these kind of things. That's why it is noble. It is noble because it makes you into a noble person by practicing this truth and achieving the insight. You become there are ennobling truths, and you become a noble one. In what sense? Because you become fully ethical, you become a fully moral person, you become someone who practices the metta and the karuna and these qualities to the highest level. So you have a noble character once you see these kind of truths. So they are noble because they are so profound and because they lead to all these positive consequences. So these are noble truths, and it's the noble truth about suffering. You come to understand the reality of suffering and therefore also the reality of happiness in the right way. You can kind of weigh up happiness and suffering, and as you weigh them up and you understand them properly, that is where that insight is, all the way to the core, all the way to the bottom, in the profoundest possible way do you understand suffering and happiness. That's great, if you understand happiness and suffering all the way, then you can make a choice. You can move in the direction of happiness and away from suffering. This is what everyone wants. This is kind of what life is all about. This is where meaning is ultimately to be found. Happiness here means happiness in the broadest possible way. Anything that is positive, really, including meaning itself. And suffering here is suffering also in the broadest possible sense, including all kinds of suffering here. So this is the noble truth of suffering here. But remember that on that path is an enormous amount of happiness. And that happiness is required for you to be able to understand suffering. So is that pessimistic or is it optimistic? I say it is really optimistic, actually. So Buddhism is an optimistic religion, not a pessimistic one. Or it's just realistic, with a good endpoint. Whatever you want to call it. Calling it pessimistic is maybe, again, as I usually like to say, we have a marketing problem in the Dhamma. We need to market these teachings better because there is so many beautiful things going on. And it is the marketing which is often not so great. So now let us go on to the contents of this noble truth. It starts here with rebirth is suffering, old age is suffering, illness is suffering, death is suffering, all very ordinary things, except maybe for the first one. Maybe rebirth is not so ordinary, but the ones that come after that, we can certainly understand. Old age is suffering. Can you understand that? In a sense we can, but in a sense we can't. This is what is so interesting about these things. We have an idea that getting old is not something that we really want. No one really wants to get old, and the older you get, things start to fail and fall apart or whatever. So we kind of understand it, but we don't really understand it. We often live as if we're never going to get old. We kind of indulge in youth. We get intoxicated by being youth. We jump up and down and say, I can mess around because I'm young. And then before you know it, you're old. And then you have messed around and created all this bad karma for yourself in the meantime. And then you really regret messing around when you were younger. And so we kind of understand it, but we don't really understand it. And I think one of the strange things about getting older or being old or whatever is that suddenly one day you just wake up and you are old. Oh, I guess I'm old now. One day it kind of sinks in, and it kind of, you realize, actually now I'm old. And what happened on the way? How did I get here? And it's kind of a blur, because you've been messing around, being intoxicated, not really understanding what you're supposed to, how you're supposed to live. And so it is a bit like that life. One day you're just old. And then it's kind of too late. It happens so fast. Life is really quite short. That's how I experience it. I experience it as really short. Just this retreat, today is already, what is it? Friday? Friday already? Wow, isn't that amazing? We just started, it was Friday when we started, now 1 week is gone already. It's hard to believe. For me it feels like just a blur. I can't even remember what sutta we did yesterday. It's kind of just all... And so that is life for you, and life itself is like that. Before you know it, it's kind of over, it's finished. You come to old age, and then it's too late. So we need to remember these things. We need to recognize that once you are old, actually much more difficult to practice the Dhamma when you're old. You can't really sit down properly, you have to, you can't, what can you do when that happens? It's kind of it's a very difficult state. And so we need to kind of start to understand that old age is already inside of us. In a way, you're already old. It's inside of you, waiting to come out. Just takes time, that's all. And suddenly one day you are older. So it's already there, waiting to come out. You aren't really young. You aren't really old. You just have all of these various states are there with you at all times. You're partly young, partly old. And all of these things, all these potentials are within you, waiting to kind of ripen as time goes by. That's kind of old age for you. And so remember that. Don't think that there is much time. There is little time. And the contemplation of old age, the purpose of that is to, first of all, overcome that intoxication with being young. And secondly, to give you that sense of this is urgent. Give you the sense of urgency. Now is the time to practice. I can't really wait. And this is kind of what this sort of contemplation is about. Don't be afraid of seeing the signs of old age. Don't go to the kind of the makeup and the Botox and whatever to kind of sort out the wrinkles as soon as they appear. No, enjoy those wrinkles. See, oh, there's a wrinkle. I'm getting old. Okay, gray hair. Okay, wow. Okay, I better get my act together. There's kind of this very nice little sutta. It's called Makadeva Sutta, I think, in the Majjhima Nikaya 83 or something. And according to the Makadeva Sutta, these were the wheel-turning monarchs, and they lived for 84,000 years. And the wheel-turning monarch would go to his barber, and he would say to his barber, "Barber, when you see a gray hair on my head, let me know." And then after 20,000 years, the barber would see a gray hair on the king's head. And he would say, "Sir, I can see a gray hair on your head." And the king would say, "Pluck it out and show it to me." And so would take tweezers and pluck out the gray hair and show it to the king. And the king would say, "Okay, this is the Deva Duta has arrived. The divine messenger has arrived. This is a sign I'm getting old. Time to renounce the kingdom and become an ascetic." And so the king, Makadeva, this fabulously wealthy king, these are kind of the kings of legend, the kings of mythology, fabulously wealthy, loved by everyone, has everything in the world that anyone would ever want. He gives up his kingdom, practices samadhi, practices deep meditation, and then gets reborn in the kind of realm that accords with that afterwards. This is the heavenly messengers. Listen to those heavenly messengers. When you see a wrinkle in the mirror, stay with it. That's a wrinkle. I'm getting older. Something happens straight away. You can feel that there's something inside of you that doesn't want to see it. You can see the gray hair. You don't really want to see that gray hair. Something kind of feels repelled by that. Have you ever had that feeling? You don't have to nod your head or anything. This is a rhetorical question. It's a feeling that you know that this is heading in the wrong direction. You can feel that all your attachments are being challenged by that gray hair, by that wrinkle. It's kind of obvious when you feel it. And when you feel that repulsion, when your mind wants to turn away from it because you don't want to deal with it, that is when you should stay with it. Allow it to sink in. Be mindful of it. And what you will feel when you do that is that you become peaceful. Because gradually the attachment and the desire you have for the body, the attachment you have in that world of the five senses, it loosens. Because something deep inside of you recognizes the reality. This is a sign that you can no longer hold on in that world. That world must come to an end eventually. And so these contemplations, not only do they give a sense of urgency, but when you do them in the right way, they make you peaceful. Because you start to recognize the reality of the world. You recognize what life really is about. You understand the impermanence, the uncertainty. There is literally nothing to hold on to in this world. Everything has to go. And when you see that, even a little bit, you become more peaceful. So stay in the mirror. Observe that sign of old age. Stay with it until you start absorbing it. You lose some of that intoxication and you become peaceful instead. You may not like it initially, but that mental state that arises is actually very beautiful. And the mental beauty, far more important than the physical good looks or whatever. And that is what you want to develop. This is the idea of using the contemplation of old age in a good way. This allows you this clarity about what is going on, the clarity of the mind is what comes out of that. So make a lot out of these things. These are powerful contemplations. The next contemplation is vyadi, which is illness. The next one is marana, which is death. Jati pidukkha, jara pidukkha, vyadi pidukkha, maranam pidukkha. They're all suffering here. And these are simple yet profound things, and done in the right way, they have great benefit. This is the point here. So the next one is about illness. Illness is suffering. You know what it is like when you become ill. When you kind of get a fever and you just have to lie in bed. Not just the cold. The cold is not really enough to be called an illness. But when you get a fever, like a flu or some other kind of a bacterial infection or whatever, and you just have to lie there staring at the ceiling, kind of moaning because you feel so out of it, you can't do anything. It's terrible. It's really bad when that happens. This is the nature of the body. The nature of the body is to get older. The nature of the body is to get ill. Illness will always happen. Yeah, the guaranteed it's going to happen sooner or later. Nothing has gone wrong when you get ill. Everything has gone right when you go ill. When you become sick, you know Ajahn Brahm's famous saying, when you go to the doctor, you should say, "Doctor, doctor, something is right with me. Yeah, I'm sick again today." And the doctor sends you off to the nearest mental asylum. And yet you are right. Yeah, it is true. Nothing has gone wrong with you, because that actually is the nature of this body. This body is so complicated. There are so many things that can go wrong with this body. Of course you're going to get ill. Yeah, when there is a cancer in your body, when there is a heart attack, all of these things are just par for the course, really, to be expected. And again, when that sinks in, that these things are to be expected, nothing has gone wrong, you still go to the doctor, you still take medicine, because you don't want to kind of make things worse than they are. You still do that, but you also take a moment just to reflect. If this is the nature of the body, actually it is much less interesting than I thought. We tend to deny that reality. We think that it is wrong when it happens, but when we understand that it actually is right, it takes away some of the infatuation with the body, with being healthy, with these kind of things. And again, it makes your mind peaceful when you think in the right way about this. The last one here is the death is suffering. Yeah? So death is suffering, sure, we all sort of know that already, but again, this is also much more profound than we think. We haven't really taken it fully on board. And I've talked about death quite a bit already, the idea that it is not the fact that we are going to die that is surprising or interesting. What is really interesting is that we don't know when we are going to die. That is what is really interesting. And that is what makes that sense of urgency so powerful. And it's this idea that you are always on your deathbed, always on your death seat. Yeah, always. It's always kind of potentially there around the corner. You just don't know. No idea. Yeah, and sometimes what you have to do is you just have to remind yourself of all the things that can happen. Sometimes you can read people dying, read in a newspaper or look online about people dying around the world, and people die in all kind of random ways. Most people die of old age or maybe illness. Many people die in war. Yeah, when is war going to come to Perth? We don't know. Yeah, it doesn't seem likely, but what is unlikely is not impossible. We just have no idea. Death, is around the corner. People die in the weirdest kind of ways. They fall down a staircase. They cross the road at the wrong time. They just didn't see that truck or car coming. Yeah, and sometimes we just don't see things. And don't think that the people that you read about in a newspaper, they are somehow stupid. They didn't look properly, but you always look properly. There will be a day when you are also distracted, or you see things in the wrong way, or there is a mirage or something goes wrong. You are no different. I am no different. We are no different from everyone else. We will make the same mistakes. And so when you read someone falling down a staircase, someone being bitten by a snake and dying, should I tell you about the number of snakes in the forest around here? You will stop going for walks after that. You will get so concerned. Actually, this time of the year, the snakes are not very active because it's too cold. But there are snakes around here as well, right? There are cars around here. Cars much more dangerous than the snakes. So watch out for those cars. When you see a car, that's when you should take a different road, not when you see a snake. So when you see that car, whatever, then run as fast as you can. So many ways that we can die. So many things can happen. Illnesses can be inside of us right now. We just have no idea what is going on with our bodies. And so you make this a reality. You can die at any time. And what that does, it makes the present really valuable. Now is the time that I'm alive. I have to make the most of this. And especially I have to make the most of it in terms of spiritual practice. Yeah, now is the time to be kind. Now is the time to be generous. Now is the time to say the right thing. Now is the time to think the right thought. Now is the time to meditate peacefully. Because one of the things that the idea of death contemplation does, it doesn't allow you to have any desires or any aversions or any ill will. If you could die at any time, why would you desire anything? Desire is about the future. If you have no future, there's nothing to be desired. And so you are hopefully content right here and now. If you are going to die, there is no future, you're not going to have any arguments with anyone. All those arguments that we have seem so petty and stupid in the face of death. Why are you going to argue with anyone? And if you have no arguments, if you have no ill will, and you have no desires, well, basically your mind becomes peaceful. And that is why you see, when you see people who die well, who die peacefully, that is why they die peacefully, because they are able to let go. They know that they have no future, and so all the desires and everything that relates to this world kind of disappears. And what you're left with is a peaceful mind state. That is the power of the death contemplation. So do the death contemplation in whatever way you like. What I was just doing the other night was just to give you some idea of how it can be done, how you can reflect on these things. But really, the point is just to have that awareness that death can arise at any time. Use it in your daily life. Remind yourself every day, and it will make you a better person if you remember death every day of your life. It makes you a more gentle, caring, kind, compassionate, peaceful person if you do that. And that is the power of the death contemplation. So now one of the kind of remarkable things about these contemplations that you can read about also in the suttas in various places is that these were the contemplations of the Buddha to be. Before he became the Buddha, while he was kind of moving in that direction, this is what he contemplated. And these are the things that led to the Buddha's going forth. Have a look again at the Arya-Pariyesana Sutta, where the Buddha talks about this, the Noble Search Sutta. And he talks about how he is subject to birth, how he's subject to old age, to sickness, to death, and also to defilements. And then he reflects on that. And then he reflects on how all he's doing is kind of grasping other things that have the same problem, like a wife and children and whatever, all the kind of belongings or whatever you own, or the animals you own or whatever. And when he reflects on that, he decides to go forth. And so in one sense, the reason why we have the Dhamma today is because one person reflected incredibly deeply on death, so deeply that he decided to go forth and become an ascetic and then achieve that liberation from death. That is one way of looking at the Dhamma, simply coming from a death contemplation. Death contemplation was what gave rise to this whole thing called Buddhism, and that's why we have it in the present day. That's kind of extraordinary. That's kind of amazing. Just contemplating death gives rise to that. Wow. So this is how profound these things are. Now you can maybe start to see what I mean by that. Yes, we think we know what these things are, but actually they are much more than what we think they are. There's much more profundity to these things. They are worthy of a lot of contemplation. And as you do that, the worldly things fade away. You become peaceful. You become quiet. You can sit in meditation. This is why the death meditation is so useful. At the beginning of a meditation, if you feel a bit agitated or restless or whatever, you can do the death contemplation. It will take you in the right direction. Then you can sit down. You can become peaceful and watch the breath or whatever as a consequence. There's a lot of similarity between dying and going into meditation. Because dying, as I just mentioned, is about giving up desires and ill will. It's about letting go of everything in the world. Well, that is exactly what meditation is about. It's about letting go of everything. It is about reducing desires and ill will. And so there's a very strong similarity between the two. And this is also why death is a very powerful spiritual moment. It's a spiritual time when you can easily achieve samadhi through the death process, or you can achieve insight through the dying process. And so because they have so much in common, they can be used also in common like that. That's why you meditate while you're dying, and you do the death contemplation while you're meditating. Yeah, the two kind of going together in this way. And this is what makes it very, very interesting. So, yeah. But there is one thing I haven't spoken of. There's quite a few things that come after this, but I have skipped one thing. And the one thing I've skipped is rebirth is suffering. So why have I skipped that? Well, the reason is because this is where it gets even much more profound again. You have thought already maybe that I have already kind of drawn out some of the implications of old age and illness and death that are quite interesting, but actually it is much more interesting again. And so the point here is that what we are seeing here is a jati pidukkha. Jati, the word jati is often translated as birth in the Dhamma, and birth is not wrong, but it is also not the whole picture. Why is it not the whole picture? Because rebirth is also jati. So what does it mean here? Does it mean rebirth or does it mean birth? In India, the assumption was that there was rebirth. And so when you use the word jati, you also meant rebirth. But if we say birth in the English language, it would never mean rebirth. It has absolutely got nothing to do with rebirth whatsoever. It just means birth in this life. You have been born and you're going to die. And so because in the ancient India it also meant rebirth, if we just translate as birth, it doesn't really have the same meaning. People don't understand the word in the same way. We hear words depending on the cultural context. The broader context gives meaning to the words. And so even though a lot of people insist on calling this jati, calling it birth, actually rebirth is maybe closer to the reality. And another way of seeing that is to understand that the purpose of the Dhamma is to overcome suffering, right? This is the third noble truth, the ending of suffering. The first noble truth is the kind of suffering we're supposed to end. The third noble truth is the ending. So what is the kind of suffering that you can end? You can't end the birth you have already had. It's too late. You are here. It's finished. You already made that mistake, right? It's done. The only kind of suffering in terms of birth that you can overcome is the suffering of rebirth. And so in the first noble truth, it must actually refer to rebirth. It can't really refer to past birth that has already happened. And so for that reason, it is very helpful to translate it as rebirth. And this is one of the innovations that Bhante Sujato did when he translates this first noble truth. And I think it's really nice, rebirth. And it was very interesting because sometimes when you are a monk, you kind of get to go into kind of unusual places. And one of the places I went to a couple of years ago was Oxford University. And so I was invited by some of the lecturers at Oxford because I had translated the Vinaya Pitaka, which is like a big translation work. And so they invited me to give a talk to the lecturers, the kind of the ones in the field of Buddhist and language studies at Oxford University. That was kind of cool, So that's a kind of thing that I kind of enjoy, doing things that are out of the usual, right? It's not that it's very meaningful, it doesn't really help you so much in the Dhamma, but it's just kind of interesting thing to do. It doesn't take that much time either. So I gave a talk to them about how to translate Buddhist texts or certain Buddhist vocabulary. And so one of the words that I discussed very briefly, I discussed mostly words that I was interested in from the Vinaya, but we mentioned the word jati. Should it be translated as birth or as rebirth? And these are like the dons of Oxford University, right? These are really educated people, the top of academia in the whole world, basically. And they were really against the idea of rebirth. No, it should be birth. And I thought, these are supposed to be very intelligent people. They don't get basic ideas about spirituality. They don't understand what is really going on here. They are focused on linguistics, focused on whatever. They don't really see what's happening, what's going on. And you realize, that actually sometimes on the spiritual path, you have a different angle on things, an angle that is more profound, more interesting in many ways. And and that kind of gives you a degree of confidence that what you're doing is actually very useful and very special, because it is not the intellect that gives rise to the understanding. Understanding comes from something much more profound and much more deep. So, rebirth is suffering, right? Well, what does that mean then? Well, what it means, rebirth stands first. It means that old age should really also be re-old age. So this is where I disagree with Bhante Sudatta. It should be re-old age. It should be re-illness. It should be re-death. It should be being coupled with a disliked suffering. It should be re-separation from the liked suffering. It should be not getting what you want is suffering, etc., etc. It should be in brief, the five khandhas, the five grasping aggregates are suffering. It gets a bit complicated. I can see why he doesn't translate like that. It gets really kind of awkward to translate like that. But this is the point. The point is that because it starts with rebirth, all of these things are really related to what happens after you get reborn. Yes, it is true in this life. We should use it in this life as well. But the bigger picture is that it's about this cycle of existence. And so what we are really seeing here, when you understand this in the right way, it is not just about these things that we experience right here in this life. It is actually about the broader idea of samsaric existence, the round of birth and death going on indefinitely into the future. That is what this really is about, and that is what you're seeing here. If you interpret this in the right way, it is much more than what actually meets the eye. And that is like the profoundest level of these words that initially seem so ordinary. Actually, they imply the whole of samsaric existence, the round of birth and death. And that, of course, is what is really problematic. And when you start to read the suttas and you start to see how the Buddha describes these things in certain places, that is a really, really fundamentally problematic, and that is what we're talking about here. There is a nice sutta where Venerable Sariputta is asked, what is suffering and what is happiness? And his answer is very simple, and now you will understand that answer, maybe at least partially. And he says, rebirth is suffering, not being reborn, that is happiness. Okay, time has already departed. So that is it for now. So please carry on having a good time, and we'll see you back again at 7 o'clock this evening.